Okay, so let's now take a look at graphing. We will do this in the context of growth rates. So we're going to look at the context of measuring the height of a child from the age of 2 to the age of 10. Maybe we measure the height is measured on their birthday. So I'm going to put in here and label my column, my first column, as age in years. Again, we're going to measure each year from the age of 2. Again, remembering your pattern recognition, I'm going to put in 2 here and click and drag till I get to 10. So this data I searched on the internet for one particular experiment. This is the height I found in centimeters. Age of 2, it was 81, followed by 89, 95, 101, 107, 113, 118, 124, and 128. So we've got this data now again for the height of a child as they age from 2 to the age of 10. Again, just certain aesthetics you can change. We could add in, we can just box this to indicate that this is our data. Maybe want to highlight these cells. Again, you can always change the font if you want to. By similar ideas that you have in Microsoft Word or PowerPoint. Okay, so what I want to do here is what would this look like if we were to graph this particular data set. So when you're doing graphs in Excel, Excel will default to that the column to the left will be the horizontal or X value, and the column to the right will be the Y or vertical value or vertical axis. So what I'm going to do is highlight this whole region here and then click on charts. You've got a range of different graphs and charts in Excel, from columns to bar charts, pie charts, but we most often will use an XY scatter plot. And here you can smooth the scatter, but again, just given that these are data points and that we do not know what's in between each data point, we're just going to go with a marked scatter plot. So we end up with this graph here, and as you can see, this is again gives us a visual aspect of what our data looks like. This again is in table form. Sometimes it can be, we can sort of do a computation of like how much for each year, how much is increasing. But often this is often easier to see if we do this on a graph, that we can see this is seems to be a pretty constant growth rate between the age of 2 to the age of 10. So in a sense, we would call this a linear growth rate for this age region. So now that we have the graph, we would like to make a few different changes to the graph. Again, we begin with one of the more critical items, and given that this is a linear trend, it might be useful to know the function that describes how the height changes with age. So I might add in here, so to add in what we refer to as a trend line, we want to click on the data points, right click, and you'll see this add trend line. So if I click here, this new window will pop up for the trend line, and you'll have the type, options, line, shadow, and glow and soft changes. Which your most interest here is in the type. Given that we already know the shape of this function, I'm going to stick with linear here, which was the default option that Excel recognized. And the options that you want to choose is you want to show the equation on the chart and the R squared value, and then click OK. So we can see here that our function here, Y, here being our vertical axis, our height in centimeters, is equal to what this is referred to as our slope times x plus our intercept. So this kind of shows us that the height of this particular person is changing about by approximately 6 centimeters each year, and given by this formula. The R-squared value tells you sort of how good this linear fit matches your data set, and the closer this value here is to 1, the better this particular trend line suits your data. Here we can see this is obviously very close to 1, so we've chosen the correct trend line. So before we finish here, I want to sort of tidy up the graph quite a bit, because again we still have yet to label the axes and maybe we rushed into the trend line. So I like to, given that we only have one data set, I'm going to delete the legend here on the right, which again gives us more room on the graph for our data points. I'm also going to move this out of the way for our trend line label. Again, here we just have Excel default into labeling the name of the vertical column. So we can click in here to change this. So I'm going to do this as height versus age as a title. And title you can make your title yourself and make it appropriate. We know what we've done here is graphed the height on the vertical axis. So if I go here in on my to look for chart layout, you can see that you'll get some options for the chart title, the axis title, and so on. So I want an axis title and I want a vertical axis title. So I'm going to click on rotated. I'm going to delete the axis title that's in there and type in height, and I'll include my units in centimeters. Going to the same point, I will look for my horizontal axis. Again, deleting axis title and typing in age, and then including my units in age of years. You may also want, if you're importing your graph into a Word document, for instance, you may want to match the font that's in your graph to that what you're typing your report in. So here I'm just going to go back to home in my menu here and click on Times New Roman, assuming Times New Roman is the font that I'm using. So everything else, all fonts have now changed to Times New Roman. You can do other things with the graph. You could remove the border, and see this gray border, by right clicking and choosing Format Chart Area, and then click on Line here and change this to No Line. So that will remove the line. Again, when it imports into your document, it'll look professional. Again, we can see that there's a lot of, we typically like to use up at least 75% of the space with our data points, and we can see here that there's a lot of empty space in this region, given that we only start our data points around 80 centimeters. So we can change the scale of our vertical axis if we just double click on the axis, and you'll get the scale. Click on scale, you can see that at the moment it's set to a minimum of 0, which is probably the default, and 140 being the maximum since we go to 128. So I might change this minimum to 70, and I'll maybe leave the maximum 140, and you can see how much this is again now increased, how much of the area we're using to consider our data points. Again, there's lots of different aesthetic features that you can do with your graph. You could change the marker. Maybe you don't like the default shadow, so again, double clicking on the data point, you'll get some options here for marker fill. You can change that to a different color, and you can change the marker line or have no line. So maybe I'll go to a black. You can change the marker style, of course, the squares and so on. Again, there's lots of options here. But that is the basics of how you would graph your data, which you would use throughout the semester. The key piece is knowing, again, measuring what you want to place on your X or horizontal axis, what you want to graph on your vertical axis, adding trend lines. Here we've done a linear trend line, but you'll see many more different types of functions in the studio activities, adding, interpreting what the R-squared value is, what the function is, and what the function tells you is all important, and you'll use this feature quite often during the semester.